We've got writers here coming from doing very different things, exploring quite different subjects, but all of them are doing it in a way in which they're bringing in other people, they are talking to other people, drawing on their experiences, and then bringing them together into a work for which they are ultimately named the writers, if you like. And so what I'm really interested in just exploring is how, what are the ethics of that? If you are, ultimately you are if we look at Breach, I'd be really interested to know more about how you feel about that, because you've gone into the camp in Calais. There's been this organised serendipity, if you like, where you've sort of wandered in and talked to people and got their stories and kind of had that engagement person to person. But then you've come away and you've written a novel which ultimately you are the writers of. And so how does that work in terms of the ethics and the sense of responsibility and the role of the writer really there? I wonder if you could talk a bit in particular in relation to Breach.
Many things to say there. Maybe to start is that everyone knew that it was going to be fiction, and everyone signed a release form knowing that. I think I stated specifically that most likely the story will not appear as such, and there are amalgamations, there are things also that have to do with what we experienced, what we thought about, what we talked about. One time we were together with two others, so in the evening you talk about your experience in the day, and that's also what's gone into the stories. But it was sort of heartbreaking, because I think the biggest thing as human beings, we like to be seen and heard. And of course, these are very traumatic stories. The journey is very, very traumatic. It is exactly what we see on the news, but now you're with someone quite young, they're funny, so I click with them. You try to see them. That's a way of acknowledging their humanity. And then you go away and you use that to make a story that's based on plot points and, oh yeah, I need to cut this out, or this is doubled up, don't need to know about the boat again, because they're all coming on the boat. And it's quite heartbreaking, and I knew this beforehand, and I was a little bit reluctant to embark on the journey. But I think there is a reason for it being fiction, but I'm going to let Annie speak a little bit. So we're making it fiction so that I think people can experience certain moments, and what we could not do is repeat them all. But I'm going to shut up for a minute and say some more, because otherwise you have nothing else to say.
Yeah, I think it's a responsibility, and it's also to acknowledge at some level that you're taking something and then owning it in a way that's complicated, and that you have to reflect on and talk about. Another angle on it is what is fiction? How do you make fiction anyway? Because I think anyone who writes steals from everyone. You're warned. Anything you say will be gobbled up. So it's not so much as are we allowed to do it or should we do it, although those are questions, but also how to do it, and in terms of that collaboration, the extent to which it's possible to keep. Some of the people I talked with I couldn't find again. Couldn't get their numbers, couldn't find them, I've had to let go, but some of them we've kept in close touch with, and it's become more of a process. And so that they've been able to read the stories and feed back and talk about them. And what was quite interesting, quite soon after we came back, we wrote a blog for English Pen. That was non-fiction, it was just about our experience and a few moments. And once the one guy that I've kept in most contact with read that, I sent it to him to read, and he said, now I understand how you're trying to tell the story. And then he was really stuck for a long time in Dunkirk, and he would write me, he said, now I'm going to just be writing my story. And he was writing all the stuff, and he knew I'd use the tiniest bit, if any. And he was fine with that, and it was a really interesting, and I think we've both got individuals that we're in touch with who've talked about what the process meant for them, of keeping in touch when they were in these desperate and horrible places. Both of them, these two in particular, have come here.
No, they still there. No,
these two
have
particularly
made it
ones.
through.
yeah.
Tell your news.
Yeah, so they've made it through, and my guy, who I consider a friend, he got 5 years residency today, so I'm very, very happy. Yeah. And I was, because he was not in the group that normally gets their claims accepted, so, and it became a very emotional journey because I met him, I clicked with him, then very soon after he made it through in a lorry, and he's very particular, that's why 11 minutes, he's very particular, and it's a bit long to listen to the story because he'll give you every detail. But he was in the lorry for 26 hours. And I think that's maybe why I was so happy today. I was like, yeah, because I've been with him for 26 hours. Because the way he retells his story has allowed me to know what it means. So even though it is not in the story, because we have another story about crossing over, I feel quite grateful and humbled. But I have a similar experience where they were quite eager to fill in any gaps. Anything you need, Olu, anything. So I think maybe similar to you, people like to collaborate, and I think people like to tell their stories. And even though it's not in the book, I know his story. I know him. And I think for a long time when you're waiting for your papers, it's that moment of all this effort you made, and it's high drama, the journey's high drama, and then if you make it here, there's nothingness. And you don't know whether you'll have a future here or whether you'll be sent back. And I think I knew then that it's quite good, even if I just send a text, because there is a connection. I've seen you. I know you exist, whatever happens. Yeah, so anyway, happy day today.
And will those people that you collaborated with, will they continue to be part of what happens now in the future? I mean, when will this continue as, I mean, once you've written the book, will the book stand and be the thing that continues and the catalyst and the record, or will you all go forward and they will be part of this as an ongoing project? How will that?
I think the book is not necessarily meant. Okay, so one of the things I didn't say is I think with these things it's always important to see what somebody gets out of it. I think this in any situation in my life. So if we all get something out of it, it's good. And I think you mentioned that in a way, and it doesn't have to be payment. So obviously we also get a lot of kudos out of it, a lot of recognition for having done this. So I had questions around that, but the book is not necessarily meant for that. The book is meant for people here to provoke debate, to humanize these stories, right? So I think they will be in touch. I don't know what the publisher, if she, I was thinking couple could come to the launch and stuff like that, but it's not planned as such. I think it's more to provoke debate amongst people here.
Right.
What do you think?
I also think that people have a very different experience around what that moment means. In the book I did on the border in Zimbabwe, one of the young women that I'd worked with a lot at the last minute didn't want her story in the book because someone else had taken a photograph of her, and even though we were fictionalizing her name and everything, she was scared that people would know it was her. And that's a moment in her life when she's really, she's not the child who grew up in a happy home, she's not the young woman who's going to go forward and have a professional life, she's in this really horrible moment. And so the one guy that I'm most close to, I would text him or phone him and say, did you see what's happening in the camp, after he got here? He was like, Annie, I don't want to think about Calais. I want nothing more to do with it. I'm really glad you've written the story, but I'm going into my life. I'm going to work now, I'm going to do this. He's moved out of that moment. So I think the friendship and what we've built is something, it's personal. And I think the account of what people in general have gone through matters to the people we spoke to. But it means something different to all of us, I think.
So the book is going to be there, and then the human relationships and the process that's come out of working in that way will be another thing that will continue.
Can I add something on it? I'd worked for most of my career as a journalist, and I felt very, very painfully what it's like to have people hate what you've written. I mean, oh, poor me, But it was a big shock to me at first. I thought I'd done a good job, and I thought I'd really written about someone in a way that was going to make him really pleased. And it was like a big magazine story, and it made his company be really famous. And I phoned him 2 days after it came out and to find out how he was doing. He said, "John Paul, I've never felt so betrayed in my life."
Oh wow!
And I thought, oh my God! I mean, I didn't know what to say, and I never really understood why. And that was one of many steps on the way to realising you never know what people think of your handling of their story. Everyone in this room has had a time when someone's told a story about us and they got it wrong, and it was really horrible and painful, and it's like, I hate those fuckers. But on the other hand, it's also, if they're allowed to make sense of their world, I'm allowed to tell a story. If I did it in bad faith, then I can try to do something better next time. But if I did it in good faith, I'm just going to have to live with the horrible feeling that someone hates me. I don't like that. It's not easy. It's not a happy thing that's easily resolved. It's one of the reasons why I don't do too much journalism, because I felt like I was commoditizing other people's life. I don't want to do that. And often, the market is there and it's owned by Rupert Murdoch, and I wrote a lot for the Sunday Times. And what are you meant to do? So I thought, no, I'd rather do some other things. But that idea of owning someone else's story is, I don't own it, but this is my account of it.
Well, I think that makes me think that it's not one story, and it must never just be one story or one way of telling, because we've told our stories, journalists are telling their stories, and there's lots of projects and ways that people are working with refugees to tell their own stories. So I think we can all and do support those processes. It's not this is a choice,
So you've met people, you've understood them, you've talked with them, you've created a relationship, and then you've created something different out of their process that isn't simply claiming as a writer to tell someone's story. It's actually moving on and being inspired from that and coming up with something else. And then if everyone feels that they've got something out of that process, you're actually talking about each of those stages being quite a different thing. So with the refugees that you were working with, they felt a sense of by going through that relationship with you, that they understood what you were doing, and they thought it was a good thing, and this was for people here, and it wasn't about just telling their story in a simple way. It was about raising awareness and kind of bringing it to people in a different way than it was in the newspapers. The people who work with you, they're not your co-writers. What do they get out of it, do you think? What in the process is there for them? Because you've talked so much about how important their participation has been to you, but ultimately, again, you're the writer. This book is by John Paul Flintoff. Why have all these people joined and funded the project and given you their time and worked to improvise scenes with you?
That's a really brilliant question. And it's so rich.
What have you given them, I suppose?
It's the question that can become a bit of a critical thought, like I mustn't ask anyone because then I'm sort of exploiting them, and then nothing happens. So you have to make the offer. You have to say, I want to do this thing. I want to do this thing. What do you think? Are you up for it? Do you want to do it like this? What would you possibly get out of it? And ask them to co-design it with you. So if they say, yeah, I'd love to. So Jude sent me a text about half an hour ago saying, whatever you want tomorrow, anything, I always love it when you ask me to do a thing. That's so lovely. And that is a token of really a trusting relationship. Where I've asked her things in the past, she's asked me things in the past, we know that we're allowed to say no. That's one of the really wonderful things, actually. A lot of people in life don't know that they're allowed to say no. So if someone asks them a thing, they go, oh God, I don't want to do that thing, but right. They're half-hearted and they're miserable participants. So if you know that someone's allowed to say no at any point, and they can always tweak it, or they can say, yeah, I'll do it like this, and everyone's allowed to choose and make their own meaning out of the thing, then everyone's happy.